Aquarius. There are changes coming in 2026, not loud, not dramatic, but irreversible. You won't stop them, and a part of you already knows that. Because lately, life hasn't felt wrong, it's just stopped feeling right. You wake up, do what you've always done, talk to the same people, carry the same responsibilities, and yet something inside you keeps whispering, "This doesn't fit me anymore." 2026 doesn't arrive to destroy your life. It arrives to outgrow the version of you that learned how to survive. If you've been feeling restless for no clear reason, tired without being exhausted, calm but not fulfilled, this message found you on purpose. Sparkles, before we go deeper, tell me in the comments, do you feel like something in your life is quietly shifting right now? Because what's coming next isn't a prediction, it's the moment you realize why these changes were never meant to be stopped. And maybe that's why this year feels quieter on the outside but louder on the inside. Not the kind of loud that demands action. The kind that asks for honesty. Aquarius, I want you to imagine something for a moment. Picture your life as a room you've been living in for years. Nothing is broken. The walls are still standing, but the air feels thinner now, and every time you breathe, your chest tightens just a little more than it used to. That's not anxiety, that's awareness. You've always been good at adapting, at making space for others, at being the calm one when everyone else needed stability. But somewhere along the way, you learned how to stay without asking yourself whether you were still alive inside that staying. And 2026 doesn't rush you out of the room. It simply opens a window, slowly, quietly, letting in a breeze you forgot existed. You might notice it in small, unexpected moments. A conversation that suddenly drains you instead of energizes you. A familiar routine that feels heavier in your hands. A silence that no longer feels peaceful, just unfinished. Here's the part most people won't tell you. Growth doesn't always feel like excitement. Sometimes it feels like grief for a version of yourself that tried very hard and is finally tired. Aquarius, you don't lose yourself this year. You stop negotiating with what you already know. There's a subtle courage forming in you now. Not the dramatic kind. The quiet kind that shows up when you choose rest without guilt. When you don't explain yourself as much. When you let certain connections soften instead of forcing them to stay sharp. And maybe that brings up a question you haven't said out loud yet. If I stop holding everything together, what will remain? That's not fear talking, that's curiosity. Because underneath the responsibilities, the roles, the expectations, there's still you. Still thoughtful, still visionary, still deeply human. This year doesn't ask you to become colder, it asks you to become clearer. Clear about what drains you. Clear about what deserves your time. Clear about the difference between loyalty and self-abandonment. You may feel moments of loneliness as things shift. But listen closely. That space isn't empty. It's being prepared. Prepared for relationships that don't require you to shrink. For work that respects your mind and your boundaries. For love that feels like exhale, not effort. And here's something only an Aquarius would understand. You're not walking toward a new identity. You're walking back to a truth you've always carried, but didn't always feel safe living out loud. So let me ask you something gently, and you don't need to answer anyone else. Just yourself. If you stopped trying to make everything make sense for everyone else, what would your life start asking for? Stay with me. Because what unfolds next isn't about sudden change. It's about the quiet decisions that begin reshaping everything from the inside out. Stay close. Don't rush this feeling. After you notice that quiet pressure building inside you, something else begins to surface. Not urgency, not panic. But wait. Aquarius, comfort doesn't disappear all at once. It changes texture. What once felt grounding now feels dense. What once felt safe now feels slow, almost heavy on your shoulders. And the strange part is this. Nothing new is being demanded of you. You are still capable, still dependable, still showing up the way you always have. But your soul is asking a different question now. For years, you learned how to be the reliable one. The one who thinks ahead. The one who holds the bigger picture when others focus on themselves. You learned how to postpone your own needs because someone else always seemed to need you more. That wasn't a mistake, it was a season. But here in 2026, the cost of that self-control becomes clearer. Not dramatic, just undeniable. You might feel tired in places that used to feel steady. You might notice resistance when you try to stay quiet about things that matter to you. You might even feel a subtle frustration with yourself for no longer being satisfied with what once felt enough. That frustration is not a flaw. It is a signal. You have grown beyond the size of your old balance. And now the very structures that once supported you are asking to be renegotiated. Here is something most people misunderstand about comfort. Comfort is not the same as alignment. And safety is not the same as fulfillment. You can be safe and still be slowly disappearing. You can be stable and still feel disconnected from your own momentum. Aquarius, you were never meant to remain static. Your mind moves forward, your spirit evolves. And when your environment does not move with you, your body begins to feel the weight of staying. This is why rest doesn't feel refreshing anymore if it comes from obligation. This is why familiar roles begin to feel restrictive even if they once made sense. You are not becoming ungrateful. You are becoming honest. There is quiet bravery in recognizing that something can be good and still be complete. Not wrong, not broken, just finished. And here is the part that brings relief if you let it land. Releasing what no longer fits does not mean you lose stability. It means you redefine it. Real stability is not standing still. It is standing in a place that allows you to keep growing without apologizing for it. Let me ask you something gently. If no one needed you to stay the same, where would your energy naturally want to go? Notice how that question feels in your body. Not rushed, not forced, just curious. Because this year is not pushing you to burn bridges or abandon responsibility. It is simply asking you to stop carrying weight that no longer belongs to you. And as you allow that truth to breathe, you may begin to sense something else returning. A lightness, a quiet sense of permission. Permission to expand again. Stay with me. Because once comfort loosens its grip, your inner compass begins to speak more clearly. And what it reveals next comes not from logic, but from a deeper intelligence that has been waiting patiently for your attention. Stay with that looseness you just felt. That slight easing in your chest. Because something even quieter is beginning to guide you now. Aquarius, for most of your life, you trusted your mind first. Logic, perspective. The ability to see 10 steps ahead while others were still deciding where to stand. Your mind has been your compass for a long time. But lately something else has been stepping in. Not loudly, not dramatically, almost like a whisper beneath your thoughts. Your body. You might notice it after certain conversations. Nothing offensive was said, nothing went wrong. And yet, afterward, your energy feels strangely drained. As if something in you had to work harder than it should have. You might feel it when you agree to something out of habit. A yes that comes out of your mouth smoothly, automatically. But your shoulders tighten, your breath shortens, your body reacts before you have time to explain it away. And then there are those moments that surprise you. When you say no, not defensively, not with justification, just no. And even if your mind scrambles for a reason, your body exhales. That relief is important. This is not rebellion. It is not selfishness. It is intelligence returning to a place that was ignored for too long. Aquarius, your body has been paying attention the entire time. It noticed every time you stayed quiet to keep the peace. Every time you pushed through fatigue because you were needed. Every time you chose understanding over expression. It didn't judge you for it. It simply kept the record. And now, in this season, it begins to speak, not in words, in sensations, in tension, in ease, in the difference between what drains you and what restores you. This is how alignment begins for you this year, not through analysis, through awareness. Your body is not asking you to dismantle your life. It is asking you to listen when something feels off, even if you cannot explain it yet, especially then. Here is a truth many people learn too late. Your body never betrays you. It only reacts when you betray yourself, when your actions move away from your values, when your presence is given where it is not respected, when your time is offered without consent from your own energy. The fatigue you feel is not weakness. It is feedback. And as you honor it, something subtle changes. You begin to trust yourself again. Not the version of you that performs balance, but the version that feels it. Let me ask you something softly. What has your body been trying to tell you that your mind has been too busy to hear? There is no urgency here, no demand for perfection, just an invitation to notice. Because when you start listening to these signals, your boundaries stop feeling forced, your choices feel cleaner, and your life begins to organize itself around truth instead of endurance. This is not a loss of control. It is a return to coherence. And as your body reclaims its voice, you may find that certain connections fade more easily. Certain obligations loosen their grip, not out of conflict, but out of clarity. Stay present with this shift. It is preparing you for a lighter way of living, one where you no longer have to translate discomfort into logic before you are allowed to trust it. Something important is beginning to realign. And once your body leads the way, your life will follow with far less resistance than you expect. Stay right here with me. There is a softer quiet settling in now, not the kind that feels empty, the kind that feels honest. Aquarius, after you begin listening to your body, something else starts to happen without announcement. Certain connections lose their urgency, not because anything went wrong, but because the effort no longer feels mutual. This can feel confusing at first. You might look around and notice fewer messages, longer pauses between conversations that once filled your days. And instead of panic, what surprises you most is the absence of resentment. No anger rises. No story needs to be told, just space. For much of your life, you were the one who kept things going. You checked in. You remembered. You smoothed edges and filled silences so no one would feel left behind. It came from kindness, from awareness, from that Aquarian instinct to care about the system, not just the self. But now, something inside you no longer reaches automatically. Not out of coldness, out of balance. You begin to notice which connections breathe on their own and which ones only exist because you keep supplying oxygen. And quietly, without confrontation, you stop forcing air into places that can no longer sustain it. This is not avoidance. It is discernment. In 2026, relationships do not collapse around you, dissolve. Gently, naturally. Like fog lifting when the sun rises, some people simply drift out of your daily life. No dramatic ending, no explanation needed. You don't chase, you don't fill the gap out of obligation. And the most unexpected part is how your body responds. Less tension. More breath, more room in your chest. Aquarius, this is what emotional maturity looks like. Not cutting people off. Not clinging either. Just allowing truth to be what it is. You are no longer interested in proximity that requires self-sacrifice. Or closeness that asks you to shrink. Or loyalty that only flows in one direction. This does not make you detached. It makes you present. There is a quiet grief here, yes. But it is clean grief. The kind that honors what was without trying to resurrect what no longer fits. And here is the healing truth. Not everyone who leaves your life is a loss. Some are a release. Some were chapters, not destinations. Let me ask you something gently. When you imagine these quieter spaces around you now, do they feel lonely or do they feel like relief? Pay attention to that answer. It carries wisdom. Because as certain people fade, others will eventually step forward. Not louder, not more demanding, but more aligned. Connections that do not require you to over-explain. To perform care. To carry the emotional weight for two. You are learning that intimacy does not have to be maintained by effort alone. It can be mutual. It can be easy. It can allow you to exhale. And for the first time in a long while, you give yourself permission to let relationships find their natural shape without interference. No bitterness, no blame, just acceptance. Stay with this softness. Because what opens next is not about who leaves, but about who can finally meet you in the space you have made. And that space is where breathing becomes possible again. Stay here a little longer. There is a different kind of warmth entering the room now. Not excitement. Recognition. Aquarius, after the noise fades and the unnecessary connections fall quiet, something steady begins to rise beneath your feet. A sense of being seen without asking. Acknowledged without performing. For a long time, you moved in the background. You contributed without claiming credit. You refined ideas, supported structures, solved problems quietly. Not because you lacked confidence, but because you believed the work would speak for itself. And it did. Just not immediately. Time has been watching you. In 2026, the weight of your consistency begins to register, not in loud applause, but in trust. People begin to listen more carefully when you speak. Your name comes up in rooms you are not in. Opportunities appear without you having to chase them down. This is not luck. This is delayed recognition finding its way home. The success that moves toward you now does not demand reinvention. It asks for presence, for you to take up the space you already earned. And here is where it gets subtle. You may feel the instinct to stay small, to downplay your contribution, to remain the one behind the curtain. That instinct once protected you. But now, it limits you. This year gently challenges you to stop shrinking your truth so others feel comfortable around it. You are not being asked to become louder, only clearer, clear about your value, clear about your voice, clear about your capacity to lead without overpowering. The right kind of success does not pull you into the spotlight. It meets you where you are and invites you forward with respect. You may notice invitations that feel different, roles that align with your intelligence instead of draining it, requests that come with trust already built in. This is success that feels calm in your body. Success that does not require constant proving. Success that allows you to exhale while you grow. Aquarius, you were never meant to hustle for validation. You were meant to be recognized for integrity. Let me ask you something softly. If you stopped apologizing for your competence, how would you show up differently? There is a quiet dignity forming around you now. A sense that you no longer need permission to stand where you belong. And as you accept this recognition, something else shifts as well. Your relationship with effort, you stop pushing. You start allowing. Not because you are passive, but because the right doors no longer need to be forced. This is not a peak moment. It is a placement. A settling into a role that fits after years of preparing for it without realizing you were. Stay open to this ease. Because when success arrives without chaos, it teaches you a new way to trust life. And as you stand more fully in your worth, you will begin to notice another kind of support returning. Quietly. In ways that remind you that you were never meant to carry everything alone. Let's stay with that feeling. Stay with this sense of being met. Because something steadier is arriving now. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, just quietly relieving. Aquarius, after years of carrying more than your share, you may begin to feel a subtle shift in the way life responds to you. Almost like the ground underneath softens, like you are no longer bracing for impact every time you take a step forward. You have been strong for a long time. Strong in ways that did not get noticed. You handled responsibilities without complaint. You honored commitments even when it cost you. You found ways to make things work when support was thin or absent. And you did not advertise that strength. You simply lived it. There were moments when it felt like you were holding everything together alone, managing finances carefully, absorbing pressure quietly, telling yourself you could rest later. That later begins to arrive in 2026, not as excess, not as sudden abundance, but as fairness. You may notice help showing up from unexpected places, a resource that becomes available at the right moment, a debt resolved, an offer that lightens your load without strings attached. What matters most is not the amount, it is the timing. Support arrives when you are finally open enough to receive it, and that openness did not come easily. It was earned through endurance, through humility, through learning when to keep going and when to let go. This year teaches you something profound. Needing support does not mean you failed. It means you are human. There is a deep emotional healing that comes when you realize you no longer have to carry everything by yourself. When you feel another presence beside you instead of the familiar weight of doing it all alone. Your nervous system notices first. Your breath deepens. Your shoulders lower. Your sleep becomes more honest. This is what real security feels like. Not control. Connection. Aquarius, you were never meant to survive through isolation. Your brilliance thrives when it is supported, when ideas are met, when effort is shared. Let me ask you something softly. What part of you has been waiting to finally rest without guilt? There is no rush to rebuild. No pressure to prove anything now. Life is simply balancing the scales. And as this support returns, you may find yourself becoming more generous in new ways. Not because you have to, but because you finally can. This is not about dependence. It is about interdependence. About allowing life to meet you halfway after you have walked so far on your own. You are learning that strength and support are not opposites. They belong together. And as this steadiness settles in, it prepares your heart for another realization. One that touches intimacy, connection. The way love begins to feel lighter when you no longer operate from survival. Stay here with this relief. Let it sink in. Because when you stop carrying everything alone, your capacity for closeness changes. And what unfolds next is not about effort or sacrifice, but about ease. We are getting close now. Closer to the part of the story where love stops feeling like work and starts feeling like home. Stay right here for a moment. Notice how the quiet you just stepped into does not feel empty. It feels settled, like a room where nothing is about to fall apart. Aquarius, something subtle begins to change in the way your heart responds now. Not with urgency, not with hunger, but with discernment. For a long time, love asked too much of you. You learned to love by enduring, by waiting, by believing that patience alone could turn confusion into connection. You stayed longer than you should have. You softened when you needed protection. You explained yourself to people who never truly listened. And somewhere along the way, effort started to feel like proof of love. That pattern loosens its grip this year. You may notice that chaos no longer pulls you in. The highs feel exhausting instead of exciting. The emotional roller coaster loses its appeal. At first, this new feeling might confuse you. There is no adrenaline, no tension keeping you alert, no need to constantly decode signals. You might even wonder if something is missing. But what you are feeling is not absence. It is safety. Real connection does not require you to brace yourself. It does not keep you guessing. It does not ask you to shrink or overextend just to stay close. There is a calm that settles into your body now when someone shows up consistently, when words and actions finally align, when silence is comfortable instead of threatening. This is unfamiliar territory if you have lived in emotional survival mode for years. Peace can feel quiet to someone who has known only intensity, but quiet is where the nervous system heals, where trust begins to rebuild without pressure. Let me ask you something gently. When was the last time love allowed you to exhale completely? Aquarius, you are learning a new definition of chemistry. One that does not spike your anxiety. One that does not demand constant work. One that grows through mutual presence rather than emotional labor. This does not mean passion disappears, it transforms. It becomes steadier, deeper, less performative. You start choosing connection that supports your life instead of consuming it. And there is a quiet confidence that comes with this shift. You stop chasing potential. You stop trying to rescue. You stop confusing familiarity with destiny. You recognize that love does not need to hurt to be real. This realization is not dramatic, it arrives slowly. In the way your body relaxes around the right person. In the way conversations flow without defense. In the absence of that old, familiar tension. You are not becoming colder. You are becoming clearer. And clarity changes everything. Because when love no longer feels like work, you finally have space to be yourself. Fully. Honestly. Without fear of losing connection by being real. Stay with this feeling of groundedness. It is preparing you for something even more profound. When love feels safe, it opens a door to a deeper truth about who you are becoming. And what kind of life you are finally ready to live. The story is not slowing down. It is becoming more real. There is a moment now where everything softens. Not because life suddenly becomes simple, but because you stop resisting who you are. Aquarius, this year does not ask you to reinvent yourself. It asks you to come home. You may feel it quietly at first. In the way your voice sounds more certain. In how you pause before agreeing to things that once drained you. In the calm confidence of saying no without explaining yourself. Nothing dramatic happens on the outside. Yet something fundamental shifts in your posture toward life. You are no longer leaning forward trying to prove your worth. You are standing where you belong. For so long, you adjusted yourself to fit rooms that never truly saw you. You softened your truth. You filtered your ideas. You waited for permission that was never coming. That waiting dissolves now. You begin to trust what rises in you before logic catches up. Your intuition speaks more clearly because you finally listen. And when you speak, your words land differently. Not louder, just truer. There is a deep relief in no longer auditioning for belonging. In realizing that your presence does not need approval to be valid. That your way of seeing the world was never the problem. You are not wearing a new crown. There is no performance here, no title to defend. You simply step into your rightful place. Feet grounded, shoulders relaxed, eyes forward. And this is where your power has always lived. Let me ask you something softly. What if everything you were searching for was already waiting the moment you stopped walking away from yourself? This return is not loud. It feels like integrity settling into your bones. Like decisions aligning with your values without force. Like choosing peace over pretense. You stop over-explaining. You stop dimming your originality to avoid discomfort. You stop negotiating your existence. Not out of rebellion. Out of self-respect. This shift changes how the world responds to you. Opportunities begin to meet you where you stand instead of pulling you off course. People feel your boundaries before you speak them. Your energy becomes coherent. And coherence is magnetic. Aquarius, this is not the year you fix your life. It is the year you stop living sideways. You align your actions with your inner compass. You move slower where it matters. You move decisively where it counts. There is a quiet dignity in this phase. A maturity that does not need applause. A wisdom earned through seasons of misunderstanding. You realize now that authenticity is not about being louder or different. It is about being consistent with your soul. This return is the most radical thing you can do. Because when you stand in your truth without apology, without performance, without fear, everything else begins to rearrange around you. Stay with this feeling of rightness. This grounded certainty. It is the foundation for what comes next. You are not becoming someone else. You are remembering yourself. And from this place, the future does not feel like something to chase. It feels like something ready to meet you exactly where you are. Before you go, let me leave you with something gentle and true. Aquarius, everything you just heard was not meant to rush you. It was meant to steady you. To remind you that the changes coming in 2026 are not here to break you, or push you, or turn you into someone unrecognizable. They are here because you are ready. Ready to stand in your own frequency. Ready to stop apologizing for your depth. Ready to live in alignment, not resistance. If this message felt personal, that is because it was, not for every Aquarius. The one listening quietly. The one who has carried more than they showed. The one who kept going even when no one was clapping. Let this be your permission to trust yourself again. Not halfway, not conditionally, but fully. And if something inside you softened, or nodded, or whispered, "This is me," I want you to honor that. Leave a comment and tell me what line stayed with you. Or simply write, "I'm ready." Sometimes naming it is the first act of courage. If you feel safe here, stay connected. Subscribe, so this space can keep finding you exactly when you need it. This is not the end of your story. It is the moment your path begins to feel like yours again. The journey continues. The next message is already forming. Until then, breathe, stand tall, and trust the quiet power of being exactly who you are. I'll see you in the next chapter.